So the first portion of any significance test is the state. First, you have to talk about the test. So in this case, it's a two-sample z-test for proportions. Next is the hypothesis. So this is h of 0, which is the null hypothesis, equals p1 equals p2. Next is ha equals p1, and then it can be greater, less than, or unequal to p2. So you have to make sure to define the variables p1 and p2 here because you have to talk about the problem in context. Finally, you have to talk about the significance level, which is usually alpha equals 0.05. And so in general, the two-sample z-test for proportions always deal with two-way tables, so we'll talk about how this relates to calculations later.
Next, we do the plan portion, in which we check the three conditions to perform the significance test. The first condition is to check that the data is random, which means that they come from two independent random samples or from two groups in a randomized experiment. Next, we check the 10% condition, which states that when sampling without replacement, the sample size for each group must be less than or equal to 10% of the total population. And this is to check to make sure the data is independent. The final condition is large counts condition, which is like the normal condition. The counts of successes and failures in each sample or group are all at least 10. And when checking conditions, we must make sure to not just state and check off the conditions, but also to show how the conditions are met. And this is often a common mistake.
The third step is to do the calculations, as shown with the formula on the board. If you don't remember the exact formula, worst comes to worst, you can just define the variables and the name of your test will cover you. So some common mistakes include using improper notation. So for instance, you have to be careful that the proportions in the standard deviation are combined proportions, not your typical p hat 1 and p hat 2. So the combined proportion is computed by dividing count of success by counts of individuals. So after you plug all of your numbers in, you can get your z-score, and from there you can find your p-value.
An alternative for the do portion is to use your calculator. So you first click the stat button, then you scroll to tests, and you scroll down to 2-prop z-test. And from here you just input all your information. The x's indicate the successes in your sample, and the n indicates your total sample size. And then here you input which test you're trying to test for, either not equal to, less than, or greater than, and you can calculate it, and you get all of your values. So on your test booklet, you want to actually write out the z-score and the p-value.
After performing the test, we draw conclusions. So we want to compare our p-value to our alpha significance level. So if our p-value is greater than our alpha significance level, we fail to reject. But if it's less than, then we reject. A common mistake is accepting, but you should never accept because this is a sample and it's not a definitive answer. There's always a chance of making a mistake. So the general conclusion format is saying because the p-value of blank is less than or greater than our alpha significance level, we reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. Thus, there is or is not convincing evidence that, and then state your conclusion in context. Here are some common mistakes to review.
First, don't just say yes to conditions, you should elaborate rather than just one word. Second of all, p hat is actually used in the formula while p is used in the hypotheses. This is very different in notations. Third of all, remember to use combined sample proportions in your actual calculations, but never put pooled data on your calculator or else it'll screw up your data. And fourth of all, two-tailed versus one-tailed data is different. Not equal to, when you're using the hypotheses, is equal to two-tailed, but when you say greater than or less than, it's one-tailed.
Lastly, here are some sample AP problems from past years. 2012 number 4 and 2009 4B number 3. Please check the description box for links to these problems. Thank you
for watching!